in a world where cinema reigns supreme. Join us on an epic journey through the silver screen. Welcome to What's New with Stu, a movie review, with your host Dave Stewart, a video podcast where every frame tells a story. Get ready for insights, laughs, and film debates. From blockbusters to hidden gems, we've got it all covered. Lights, camera, action. It's time for What's New with Stu, a movie review. And now your host, David F. Stewart. This episode, Blazing Saddles, 50 years later.
Hey, you can't park that animal over there. It's illegal.
In the immortal words of the late, great Benny Hill, good evening, viewers. Good evening, all. Wait a minute. Do I hear great movie lines coming in?
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Has anybody got a dime?
I don't know, Jane.
Somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes.
Holy underwear. Look what I got here.
Hey, where are the white women at?
Mongo only pawn in game of life.
Hell, I was born here, and I was raised here, and dadgummit, I'm gonna die here. And no side-winding, bushwhacking, hornswoggling, crocker is gonna roll my biscuit cutter.
Now, who can argue with that?
Oh, what a nice guy.
Gentlemen, please rest your sphincters.
Well put.
Thank you very much, sir.
What's your name?
Well, my name is Jim, but most people call me Jim.
Those are some of the greatest lines from one of the greatest film comedies ever made. Hello, everyone. Welcome to What's New with Stu, a movie review. I'm your host, Dave Stewart. I want to welcome you to my first ever YouTube video podcast. In fact, it's my first anything podcast. I have been a cinematographer and editor for over 30 years, and there's three things I like to do in life. I love to talk, I love to watch movies, and then I love to talk about those movies that I just watched. I used to write in school, and in looking back, I realized that I should have been a movie critic writing for a newspaper. My real intention with this podcast is to talk about the legacy of many films that have been made through the years, especially classic films, because as I've gotten older, I realize there are many people that have not, let's say, seen The Godfather, or Casablanca, or Shawshank Redemption, or even It's a Wonderful Life. Many people my age or even 20 years younger know these films, but there's a lot of even younger people in their 20s and 30s today that have not seen these movies. So my goal is not only to shed light on many great films, but also to compare movies. For example, I will talk about the greatest sequels ever made, the greatest war films, the greatest Christmas films, so forth. I'll discuss movies that were overlooked during Oscar time and those that may have won an Oscar but maybe shouldn't have. I want to channel Siskel and Ebert's great film critique show, which I highly advise you watch clips of them on YouTube. I want this podcast to be very personable and relatable, like friends during dinner debating whether or not Pulp Fiction was the most influential film of the past 30 years, or whether or not they can agree that Raging Bull was the greatest film of the 1980s. So if you're interested in these topics like I am, please, as they say, hit that like and subscribe button, and be sure to hit that little bell icon to get all of my upcoming future podcasts that will be available. So let's start by jumping back in the saddle, as they say, with my first ever What's New with Stu, a movie review, Blazing Saddles, 50 years later.
Robert, I swear I'll blow this head all over this town. Oh, Lordy Lord, he's desperate. Do what he say. Do what he say.
Satire, the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. And that's what Blazing Saddles was and still is, a satirical masterpiece, one of the most successful satires ever made, and one of the greatest laugh-out-loud comedies ever put on film. A movie comedy that would pave the way for future classic spoofs and satire such as Airplane, Naked Gun, Something About Mary, just to name a few. The AFI, the American Film Institute, which in 1998 started doing their 100 greatest film lists, ranked Blazing Saddles as the 6th funniest comedy ever made, and I am not going to disagree with that ranking. In fact, it's in my personal top 10 best movies of all time. It's a funny movie, all right, but like most classic films, it has something to say. It's more than just a great comedy. It makes you smile and think. Think how absurd it is when we judge others on their skin color and ethnic background, or simply judge anyone that's different than ourselves. Simply put, in my opinion, Blazing Saddles is one of the most effective and best films ever to tackle the subject of racism. Now, some people may say, that's a bold statement. A silly comedy? Really, Dave? And my response is a resounding yes, and I will defend my position later in this podcast. But a lot of times, humor is a necessary tactic and approach to tackle certain topics, and I think Blazing Saddles did it as good as any film ever made. So for those of you that have never heard or seen Blazing Saddles, the plot is very simple to explain. Set in the Wild West of 1874, the villain, who is a lieutenant governor, and he's manipulating the clueless governor, who, by the way, is actually played by Saddles director Mel Brooks.
The first man ever to appoint a black sheriff. Just think, sir. Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Lieutenant! Sir.
The lieutenant governor is heading a campaign to build a railroad so he can acquire land along the way that will make him wealthy. The only problem is there's a little town in his way called Rock Ridge.
The town saloon was always lively, but never nasty or obscene. Behind the bar stood Adol Johnson. He always kept things nice and clean.
At first he tries to scare the town folks off, but that doesn't work.
Sheriff murdered, crops burned, stores looted, people stampeded, and cattle raped.
And then he comes up with his second idea. Because they've requested a law and order man for the clueless governor to protect them, the villainous lieutenant governor figures he'll send them a sheriff that's so appalling to them because he's black that just the very sight of him will have them abandon their town. I don't know why you would think that would work necessarily, but that's his plan, and that's basically the plot of Blazing Saddles.
To the Honorable William J. Lepedimine, Governor. Forgive me. I'm not used to public speaking. We, the white God-fearing citizens of Rock Ridge.
Blazing Saddles got started in 1971. Writer Andrew Bergman, who would go on to write and direct his own films in later years, wrote the original draft of the screenplay. And he went to Warner Brothers, and they liked it. An original actor and director had signed on for the roles. In fact, James Earl Jones, the famous African-American actor who does the voice of Darth Vader for the Star Wars movies, was set to play Sheriff Black Bart, but that didn't work out, so the script eventually fell into the hands of Mel Brooks. Now, Mel Brooks, who, by the way, just celebrated his 97th birthday, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is one of the greatest comic geniuses of all time. Brooks started in the business writing for Sin Caesar and the 1950s variety show classic called Your Show of Shows. Brooks and other famous writers got their start on the show, including Neil Simon, the famous playwright, and famed director and writer and comic performer Woody Allen. In fact, in my opinion, Allen and Brooks were easily, hands down, the funniest comic filmmakers of the 1970s. I don't think it was close. After Your Show of Shows, Brooks did stand-up. He appeared doing funny bits on the talk show circuit like Dick Cavett, Johnny Carson, etc. But in 1968, he wrote and directed his first movie, The Producers, starring Jee Wilder and Zero Mostel, which also became a huge smash for him when he turned the movie into a musical Broadway play in 2001. Though tame compared with the movies of today, critics asked Brooks about his films being vulgar, and he had a great comeback. He said, "My films rise below the level of vulgarity," which I thought was a great line. Now, Brooks actually won an Oscar for Best Screenplay in 1968 for The Producers. And that film is also, by the way, in AFI's Top 100 Greatest Comedies of All Time. And obviously, I totally agree. In 1970, he made another film called The 12 Chairs. Now, that film got positive reviews. It's not as popular as other Brooks films with his fans, though Brooks has said that this one he's very proud of and should be watched more. But it was 1974 that was the signature year for Brooks. And in that same year as Saddles, he made the classic Young Frankenstein, also in the AFI's Top 100 Comedies and in my top 10. Can you believe making Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein in the same year? That's like the same significant achievement as when Steven Spielberg made Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in 1993. So Brooks wrote Blazing Saddles with Bergman and several other writers, including legendary performer Richard Pryor. Pryor was a hugely successful stand-up comedian and film actor in the 70s and 80s. His albums sold millions, and he, as well as George Carlin, are considered by many to be the two greatest stand-up comedians of all time. But in 74, Pryor was not a film star yet. He had just made the movie Lady Sings the Blues with Diana Ross in 1972, and ironically, in 74 was the year that his third stand-up album would be a breakthrough and actually win a Grammy Award and set his career into hyperdrive. Pryor would become a big movie star. I mean, he didn't make a lot of great movies, in my opinion. Some were excellent and very funny, while most of them were average to below average films. But there's no doubt that Richard Pryor was a mega film star from 1976 to the late 80s. Brooks wanted him to play the role of Sheriff Black Bart in Blazing Saddles, but the studio was against that, citing he was too risky. Unfortunately, Pryor had a drug problem, which haunted him most of his career, and he was considered unreliable and an insurance risk, especially with many of his drug use leading to arrest. So they told Brooks to get someone else. Now, Mel Brooks hired Cleon Little. Little was a Tony Award-winning actor on the stage and performed on TV as well. And Cleon Little, to me, knocked this performance in Blazing Saddles out of the park. He was unbelievable as Sheriff Bart. Now, Cleon Little had three things going for him. He was very funny, he had a lot of charisma, and he was a very good-looking man. Now, not that you have to be good-looking to be a successful comedian, of course, but I think it can add to it sometimes. For example, I think Burt Reynolds uses good looks to great comic effect by appealing to his fans, by making fun of himself and not taking himself too seriously. But the funny thing about Cleon Little was he never did anything after Blazing Saddles in terms of movie significance. If you look at his filmography, there's nothing. I mean, nothing. I remember him in a vampire comedy with Jim Carrey and Lauren Hutton, who was a model turned actress in 1985, before Jim Carrey would be known for his In Living Color fame. And that was it. I mean, I don't understand what happened there. Little, to me, should have been a huge film star. In 1971, he was on an episode of the television show All in the Family, one of the greatest satirical comedies ever made. My personal favorite TV comedy of all time, by the way. And in the show, Archie, the main character, bought a gun because there were some robberies going on in the neighborhood. So they were all at the movies one night, and unbeknownst to them, Cleon Little and Damon Wilson, who were going to play Lamont in Sanford & Son, now they robbed a jewelry store, and they ended up at Archie's house. Now, you don't steal scenes from Carol O'Connor as Archie or Gene Stapleton as Edith, but Little was every bit their equal in the episode Edith Writes a Song.
Look what we done found here. A genuine 100% dyed in the wool bigot.
Little was so good, in fact, that to me could have gotten his own show the way B. Arthur did when she premiered All in the Family for the first time as Cousin Nword. And after Saddles, he never did another notable film. Maybe he didn't want a career in movies. Maybe he shied from stardom. I don't know. But he's superb in Blazing Saddles. Now, another actor who was in Blazing Saddles that was not originally chosen was Jee Wilder, who plays the character of the Waco Kid, Jim. Now, to quote Brooks, he wanted a leathery, old-faced actor that had done other westerns to play that role. It was supposed to be played by a much older man. So Gig Young eventually got the role. Gig Young had a long film career. In fact, he won an Oscar in 1969 for a movie called They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which is not about shooting horses, but it was about a dance marathon. And then 5 years later, when they were casting the film, Brooks remembered him that role, and he gets the part, and he was a heavy drinker, and Brooks felt it made sense, a drinker playing an alcoholic in a movie. So it was a great match, so Brooks thought. But the first day of shooting is when Jim meets Sheriff Bart, and while he's in the jail on the bunk, he's hanging upside down, and Jig Young, the actor, was upside down shooting the scene, and he got sick. In fact, he had to receive medical attention, and they had to send for the paramedic or bring him to the hospital. So Brooks realized that an alcoholic playing an alcoholic wasn't going to work. So Gee Wilder, I guess, had heard about the part being available, and he wanted to play the Waco Kid. And Brooks said, no, I want you to play Hedy Lamarr.
It's not Hedy, it's Hedley Lamarr.
Sorry about that. I always forget that. And Wilder says, no, I'm not good for that part. I want to play Jim.
Listen, Bart.
And Anne Bancroft, who's the reason that Brooks and Wilder even met, because they were in a play together years earlier, she was an Oscar-winning actress. She was married to Brooks and the love of his life, said, no, I think Gene should play the role of the Waco Kid. So the bottom line is, Wilder got the role of the Waco Kid. Now, Jee Wilder's performance in Blazing Saddles is interesting to me. If you watch any of Jee Wilder's films, from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to The Producers to Young Frankenstein to Lady in Red, he always has at least one scene where he's totally exasperated. He's losing his cool, he's screaming out in frustration, and it's hysterical.
My blanket, my blue blanket, give me my blue blanket!
He has done it in every performance, in every film I've ever seen him in. It's like it's written into his contract. However, there's not one scene in Blazing Saddles that he loses his temper. He is so Joe Cool in this movie. And it's funny because he's supposed to be playing an alcoholic, and you would think they would have had at least one scene that Jim the Waco Kid loses it. But no, it never happens. In fact, it's almost as if as soon as he meets Bart, his life is for the better. He seems to stop drinking. In fact, except when they first meet and discuss their backstories, there's not one scene in the movie that I can recall where he's drinking. And it's funny to watch him play that character as smooth as he possibly could. He's so Joe Cool. And I don't know if that was Wilder's decision or Brooks had told him to play that way, but it couldn't have been a coincidence to me. It was definitely a conscious decision. Now, Harvey Korman, who plays Hedy Lamarr.
That's Headley!
Sorry, I keep on forgetting. Headley. Korman really didn't have much of a film career. I mean, in fact, most of his films I've ever seen him in were in Mel Brooks movies.
Count the money.
De Monet. Monet, say it. Monet.
Monet.
Monet. Monet. Monet. Monet. Perfect, don't forget.
But he was one of the greatest sketch comics of all time. And of course, his claim to fame, for anybody that has watched him, was for obviously being on the Carol Burnett show for 11 years. The entire run of the show with Tim Conway and Lyle Wagner and Vicki Lawrence. We all know those great skits that he and Conway made us laugh, and he was unbelievable. He could do anything. Now, there's a lot of great character actors. Slim Pickins, who had done movies like Dr. Strangelove. He's really funny in the film as the head henchman to Harvey Korman. And, of course, he was not a comic. He's a straight actor, and he's very funny in the movie. Dom DeLuise, who I always loved.
Put my hands around his 22-inch neck, and I strangled him!
And has been in other Brooks films. Is hysterical in a quick cameo.
What in the hell do you think you're doing here? This is a closed set.
Piss on you. I'm working for Mel Brooks.
Not in the face. Thank you.
Now, one last performance I want to mention in Blazing Saddles, and to quote Mel Brooks, is from the late, great Meline Khan.
Oh, you men are all alike. 7 or 8 quick ones and you're off with the boys to boast and brag. You better keep your mouth shut. Oh, I think I love him.
She was unbelievable. She plays Lily Von Stoop. It's not a huge role, but like everything she did, Khan nails it to perfection.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome, come on in.
Meline Khan did not have a long career, but to me, she's the funniest actress in the history of cinema.
Would you please step on the same foot at the same time? My tits are falling off!
If you look at all her work, put it all together, it's hard to argue that. Now, historically speaking, women have not had the chance as men in film. We know that. Especially when they got older, got into their 40s. I mean, it's better now, but still compared to men, I mean, men got all the breaks. I mean, Meryl Streep is the exception to this fact that you can be any age and still be successful in films. But women have not really been given the chance to be funny in movies. You just don't really see it. I mean, Melissa McCarthy was great in Bridesmaids. She was hysterical. She stole every scene she was in. She was even nominated for Best Supporting Actress. And it got her a few starring roles. But you really don't see it a lot when women are given the chance to be funny in a Hollywood film. Now, in TV, you have Lucille Ball, Mary Tyler Moore, Roseanne, Carol Burnett. The women on Saturday Night Live have been kicking butt over the last, especially the last 20 years. But Hollywood movies seem to be a bigger obstacle for them. So Meline Khan had her most success in the early 70s to the beginning of the early 80s. She died very young of cancer, but she was so funny, and most of her performances were in Mel Brooks movies. She never starred in a role. It was always supporting, even though I thought she was very attractive, and I think she could have done anything asked of her. She was even nominated for Best Supporting Actress in Paper Moon with Ryan O'Neal and his daughter Tatum O'Neal in 1973. She didn't win. And in the following year, she's nominated again for Blazing Saddles. I mean, 2 years in a row, back-to-back, she's nominated. I mean, you don't even see that even today. Meline Khan, one of the greatest comedic performers of all time. I just want to say, again, how fantastic she's in and everything she's ever done. And she is sorely missed. There are many great scenes in Blazing Saddles, like the Campfire Scene, one of the classics. It's the first time Brooks claimed where flatulence was used in a film. It's hard to disagree with him, because I don't know any other movie before Blazing Saddles that depicted flatulence on film in any form. It just wasn't done. I haven't been able to find anything. That scene is just hysterical. I mean, Brooks even said the audio was actually made louder because he knew people would be laughing so hard it would drown out the sound. And I just laugh every time I see that scene.
How about some more beans, Mr. Taggart? I'd say you've had enough.
The letter to the governor when we first meet Brooks.
Governor, may I disturb you for a moment, sir?
I love toys. May I try one?
Please do, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. These things are defective.
Right as usual, sir.
Show off.
Later, when the governor meets Black Bart, is hysterical.
You come here. Have you gone berserk? Can't you see that man is a nit? Wrong person. Forgive me. No offense intended.
Those scenes kind of remind me of the Marx Brothers in their heyday. For those of you that don't know the Marx Brothers, go on YouTube and search Duck Soup or Night at the Opera or Animal Crackers. I mean, I can see Groucho Marx doing the kind of scenes they did, like with his brother Chico. It just reminded me of that. The first time that we ever meet Bart in the beginning of the movie, when one of the ranch hands asks him to sing a song, is very, very funny.
I get no kick from champagne. Mere alcohol doesn't thrill me at all.
Hold it! What the hell is that shit? I'm in a song. A real song. How about the Camptown Ladies? The Camptown Ladies. The Camptown Ladies.
And of course, when Bart shows up to the town and meets the town folks, is one of the greatest scenes in film history.
It's my privilege to extend a laurel and hearty handshake to our new
The way he manipulates them into getting out of that situation is really well done. Incredible writing there.
Hold it. The next man makes a move, the nigga gets it.
Hold it, man. He's not bluffing.
When Bart meets the Waco Kid in a great scene as they both tell their backstories.
A man drink like that and he don't eat, he is going to die.
When?
The ending with Dom DeLuise, what can you say? That's just a great ending. Literally breaking the fourth wall.
Throw out your hands, stick out your tush, hands on your hips, give them a push.
Which, for those of you, if you don't know what that means, breaking the fourth wall is when the actor, which may be looking off camera like this, he turns to the camera and he talks directly to the camera like I'm doing to you now. And there's a lot of movies that have had scenes like that. Like Saddles in this movie had a couple of examples of it.
Oh! Ow! Have you ever seen such cruelty? Oh! Oh! Ow!
Harvey Korman was doing it. Cleon Little did it a couple of times, and now it becomes literal. Kind of the ending before the ending, when the townspeople are fighting the villains, and the next thing you know, it breaks into another movie where Dom DeLuise is directing a musical number. And as I mentioned earlier, he's one of my favorite comics, and it's just a very, very funny scene. And of course, Meline Khan is Lily Von Stoop singing I'm Tired, which Brooks wrote, by the way. He wrote that song.
I'm tired, sick and tired of love.
That scene alone, which is on stage singing to the townsfolk, that scene alone probably got her the Oscar nomination because it's just that good. She's funny with her sexual impulses and innuendos. I mean, she never actually uses filthy language.
Let's face it, everything below the waist is kaput.
Whether it's History of the World Part 1, or even the scene in High Anxiety when she gets an obscene phone call and she's trying to blow it off, and then she's getting really turned on while she's talking to the guy. Very funny. Now, the critical response to Saddles was very positive. Roger Ebert, who loved the film, and said, and I quote, "The film's got no polish, the total structure's a mess, but what does that matter when Alex Harris, as Bongo, is knocking a horse out cold with a right sock to the jaw?" Which is how I opened this podcast, with that scene. He gave the film 4 stars, and it's one of his favorite films. Now, Matt Zoller Seitz, who writes for RogerEbert.com, I read an article 4 months ago because it was the 50th anniversary that Blazing Saddles premiered this past February. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been 50 years. It really is. So it's interesting because here's a film that takes on institutionalized racism, shows how people have to handle bigots or talk to them. And at the core is a scene that gives the movie its heart, because the film in a lot of ways is a buddy movie.
Good morning, ma'am. And isn't it a lovely morning? Up yours.
Who would talk to someone like that? I know she wants him to leave the town, but it's hysterical that an old woman would say something like that when he's just trying to be nice for her. Wilder supposedly had Cleon Little laughing, and he's trying to hold it in. So when he's talking with him, he's going on and he's explaining his thoughts on the town.
These are just simple farmers. These are people of the land. You know, morons.
So finally he gives that punchline, you know, morons, and he breaks out laughing. And again, Seitz comments on the fact that friends are there to make you laugh at the times that you don't want to. Little was upset that the woman had said what she said, and Wilder makes him laugh at a time that he doesn't want to. And I just thought it was a great way of looking at friendship. So I'll give credit to Seitz for writing that article. Now, fun facts about Blazing Saddles: Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son, who wrote the best-selling book World War Z, was born during the writing process of Blazing Saddles. John Wayne, the famous movie icon, was approached by Brooks about starring in the film, and Wayne read the screenplay and said, no, I can't do this. It's way too controversial for me. I can't do it. But he thought it was funny, and he told Brooks, however, I can't do it, but I will be the first person online to watch it. I thought that was a great line for one of the greatest movie stars ever. Now, while they were filming Blazing Saddles, Jee Wilder had the idea for a comedy, and he approached Brooks. He said, wouldn't it be funny if the grandson of Victor von Frankenstein did not want to follow in his grandfather's footsteps? He's a doctor, and he denounced his family name, and Brooks thought that would be great. And Brooks, who grew up with a fear and a fascination with Frankenstein as a kid, they both decided this would be a great spoof. So Brooks makes Young Frankenstein that same year as Blazing Saddles, and it came out in 1974. So again, the whole thought and writing process started while they were doing Blazing Saddles. Hedy Lamarr, an actress, and you've been hearing me mention her name a few times, actually sued Brooks and I guess the production company, Warner Brothers, for the use of her name in the movie, which gets a lot of big laughs because the villain's name is Hedy Lamarr, not Hedy. And when I first saw the movie, I didn't even know who Hedy Lamarr was. I just was laughing at every time they would screw up his name. I don't think most people knew. I mean, it wasn't like she was like Katharine Hepburn, but she was an actress that was, I guess, during her time was well known. Meline Khan was doing an impression of the German-born actress Marlene Dietrich. Dietrich was in a 1939 movie called Destry Rides Again, which was a Western, with my favorite actor of all time, Jimmy Stewart, and she was playing a ballroom singer and entertainer. She had a very distinct German accent, which Khan used to great comic effect, not pronouncing her R's.
Oh, a wet rose. How romantic.
I didn't realize till years later that she was sending up Destry Rides Again with Marlene Dietrich, because when I first saw Blazing Saddles, I never saw Destry Rides Again. So many people are probably not going to realize that it's a send-up of that movie. One more fun fact, too, is vulgar as its reputation seems to be, Blazing Saddles has no actual sex scenes, no nudity, no blood, really. People get shot and they just fall down. There's no guts pouring out of somebody's chest. And interestingly enough, they never use the F word, not once. Which leads me to my final topic on the film. Why did I choose this movie? And why could it not be made today? Because you hear that all the time about Blazing Saddles. I think it's a film that is very different from anything Brooks ever made. He's done many classic comedy movies. He did Young Frankenstein, Silent Movie, History of the World Part 1, Spaceballs. Other than a few films like Life Stinks, Brooks usually only did parody films. He never really did attempt to do what Woody Allen did, which was more serious dramas. I mean, he produced The Elephant Man, but that's as serious as it got. But his film here, the attack on racism, is something that had never been done at the time. Not like this. Gentleman's Agreement, the first major Hollywood movie to tackle anti-Semitism, and even won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1947, was one of the first films to tackle the racism. To Kill a Mockingbird, the 1962 film, which was based on Harper Lee's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, which tackled racial issues like no other film before, so that was a landmark film. Mississippi Burning, 1988 movie, which was inspired by true events, did a wonderful job of analyzing race relations in the South of 1964. 12 Years a Slave, which came out in 2013 and won Best Picture, was a great harrowing retelling of a true story of a free black man's abduction during slavery and his rescue 12 years later. It's a great movie about a true story, but I would argue that Django Unchained, which was fictional, I actually thought did a much more effective job going after the subject of racism. Now, Saddles is a satirical Western comedy that employs racial slurs and other controversial language to critique and parody racism, prejudice, and the Western film genre itself. And I think that is where the problem, again, lies. In terms of whether it could get made today, it's the tone of the film. I actually think Blazing Saddles is tame compared to Dirty Grandpa, let's say, and other films made since that use sex and violence to help get their message across. I mean, I watch some of these films with my son, these comedies, and I just can't believe that what's being done today. And then I watch Blazing Saddles with my son, and he's like, Dad, what's the big deal? They're just making fun of bigots. And he's 16 years old, and he's getting it. And the big caveat is the use of the N-word. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of movies made today, because you're not supposed to use the N-word anymore. I mean, even Richard Pryor in 1981, after years of using the N-word in his stand-up act, swore off from using it after he visited South Africa. And as the years went on, you still hear the word in a lot of films, but the acceptance is not tolerable by many, even in dramas. Director Quentin Tarantino is known for using the word quite often in his films, and he has defended his position, as well as Samuel L. Jackson, who has used the word for him in a lot of the movies, because they believe in delivering the Tarantino lines with the use of the word is needed for those characters. So I was thinking about this and preparing for this podcast. The N-word is used 17 times in the film Blazing Saddles, which is a lot compared to most other films, but nowhere close to the record. Now let's compare that to other films that have been made in the last 40 years. Okay, Django Unchained came out in 2011, used the word 110 times. It's not technically a comedy, but humor is used throughout the film. Mississippi Burning, 1988 drama, I mentioned it earlier, inspired by true events, used the word 64 times. Lean on Me, a 1989 drama, which is used the word 4 times. Pulp Fiction, Tarantino movie, 1994, used the N-word 18 times. Again, another drama with a lot of humor. Jungle Fever, Spike Lee, African-American director, 1991 film, used the word 38 times. Drama, again with humor. Another Lee classic, Do the Right Thing. N-word was used 24 times. Very serious drama with some humor. Now, what you can get away with in the theater is not the same on television. You can make movie dramas using the N-word, for example, but not on TV. South Park and Family Guy get away with a lot, especially South Park, but I feel that's because they are animated. They get their share of ridicule and complaints, but if they were live action, I don't think those shows would be on the air. I really don't. I remember when South Park had an episode where they did a whole thing about how you couldn't say the S word on TV. And the whole show, as they were saying the S word, S-H-I-T, if you didn't know what I meant, the counter in the bottom corner is counting how many times they're saying the word. That was big news at the time. I thought it was a funny episode, and I know what they were trying to do, but that was big news at the time. And I feel the reason Blazing Saddles couldn't be made or wouldn't be made today is because, like I said, is because of the humor, the tone. Some would argue that it comes across as they're making light of prejudice, when in fact the humor is the weapon being used to attack racism. Some people feel that certain topics are off limits and that humor especially cannot be used in films because it's not appropriate. It's not woke. It's not politically correct. Now, if you took the N-word out of Blazing Saddles, it would soften the film for sure and make it less shocking. However, that would still leave some misogynist and chauvinistic terms that are used in the movie, as well as some other racial slurs. Now, some people watching Blazing Saddles might be offended when they listen to some of this stuff. Some may laugh. Some might do both, be offended and laugh. But I think the N-word, especially, and some of the language that's used in the way they use it in the film, some people wouldn't feel comfortable with that today because it's making you laugh. I think that bothers people, and it's an interesting topic to discuss. Now, there are some people that feel that Blazing Saddles is a racist movie. When hearing about this, Whoopi Goldberg, who is obviously African-American, spoke about this topic on her show The View a while back, defending the film, saying about Blazing Saddles, and I quote, "It deals with racism by coming at it right, straight, out front, making you think and laugh about it. Because listen, it's not just about racism, it's all the isms. He hits all the isms." Blazing Saddles, because it's a great comedy, would still go over today. There are a lot of comedies that are not good, okay? We're just going to say that. That's not one of them. Blazing Saddles is one of the greatest because it hits everybody. If you've never seen Blazing Saddles, you should do yourself a favor, get some popcorn, get a glass of wine, and put it on because it's magnificent. Jee Wilder said one of the reasons he wanted to make the film was because
they've smashed racism in the face and the nose is bleeding, but they're doing it while you laugh. And that's what I thought was one of the most brilliant things about the movie.
I think humor is a weapon to be used against a lot of injustices in the world, and racism is one of them. And I think that film, though it may make you feel a little uneasy at times, is extremely effective at punching holes in the wall of bigotry. Blazing Saddles was set in 1874, made in 1974. So we're now 150 years removed from when it was set, and yet in many ways we're still having some of the same issues with race today. Things are a lot better, obviously, but a lot of things still need to be fixed. I don't think there's anything wrong with laughing at ourselves, even the people that are portrayed as ignorant and a little antiquated in their beliefs and feelings. I think part of this is also proven by the reaction videos on YouTube. There are many reaction videos to Blazing Saddles and other films that may be considered controversial, like the TV show All in the Family, where African Americans are watching the movie or the show and they're laughing. My first thought is, well, it can't be that bad. I mean, it can't be that offensive. They wouldn't have done the review to begin with. They wouldn't have posted it if they hated it. I mean, I've never personally seen a movie reaction video where the person hated the movie. They may exist. I have not seen one myself. And obviously, they need to hate it because when you watch the reaction video, they're laughing. I mean, you can tell when they're shocked by something, maybe offended by something. But I noticed one thing. They're laughing at the right moments. So Brooks must have been onto something. Now, certain scenes in Saddles, like when Sheriff Bart first shows up to the town.
Hey, the sheriff is a nick.
What are you saying? The sheriff is near.
No, God blame it, dang blame it. The sheriff is a nick.
There are people like, oh my God, as they're watching this. They're laughing because it's funny, but they're also shocked because you're not supposed to hear the N-word anymore. It's the film from 1974. I think it's okay to laugh at some of this stuff. I mean, again, I respect people's opinions. And if you don't want to watch it because you're offended, okay, I respect that. No matter what race, religion, sexual orientation, we're all created equal and should respect each other and treat each other as we would like to be treated. I always loved movies where there are characters that are from completely different backgrounds that come together to either befriend, love, or just help each other out. It may not happen in real life as much as it should, but anything is possible in the movies. This is obviously shown in Blazing Saddles as a white Jewish gunslinger befriends a former black railroad worker turned sheriff and hero to his town. They go off together into the sunset at the film's end in a Cadillac limousine. It's a classic ending that makes you feel good. And for those who resist change and the acceptance of people of different backgrounds, well, you can change too. When Olson Johnson was told by Sheriff Bart that the railroad workers would be more than happy to help save his town, he commented that they only asked for some property they could call their own. His initial response?
All right, we'll give some land to the niggers and the chinks, but we don't want the Irish.
Everybody. Don't worry, he accepted the Irish too.
Oh, prairie shit. Everybody.
If he can embrace change, then we all can. I want to thank you for joining me with What's New with Stu, a movie review, my first ever video YouTube podcast. Again, please hit the like and subscribe button. Please keep a lookout for more of my podcasts and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any. And the next time, I'll see you at the movies. Hit it.
He rode a blazing saddle, he wore a shining star. His job to offer battle to bedmen near and far. He conquered fear and he conquered hate. He turned our night into day. He made his blazing saddle a torch to light the way.
Goodbye, viewers. Goodbye, all, as Benny Hill would say.